Hello. It's your girl, Camille B, the HR counselor. I am super excited to introduce my guest, Angelica Patlan. She is the HR coordinator with Assemble HR Consultant. Welcome, Angelica.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. So let me tell you all, I met with Angelica. This is actually the first time I've seen her face to face, not on LinkedIn, but we actually connected on Clubhouse. And she has been moderating some amazing rooms, but I really wanted to connect with her to really have a conversation about her being an up and coming HR professional. And so one of the first things I want to ask you, Angelica, is why? Why did you decide to get into HR?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, I never really even thought HR was a career, to be honest. And, I went in to school for an anthropology degree. I love watching people, how they work, how they interact with their culture, how that impacts how they interact with other people. So when I got out of school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I ended up getting into police dispatching. And I did that, for 3 years. And it was during that time that I realized that the way in which an employee feels in the workplace impacts how they treat your customer, impacts how they show up. And it was the result of a toxic workplace that led me to think about HR. I left a workplace and I thought, well, who was I supposed to contact about this? Who's there really for the employee? And at first I thought HR was just about hiring, firing, maybe disciplining. And if you resign, they're there for you as well, which is true.
Yes.
But I ended up, researching a little bit more, and I found Southern New Hampshire University's program, and they are really big on strategic HR. And that is something I never heard of. And when I started doing this graduate program, it really taught me about the fact that HR truly is a business leader that specializes in people. And from that moment on, I was like, this is where I want to be. I want to help businesses achieve their goals, but still keep humanity within that as well.
I love that you spoke to my heart, because let me tell you, Angelica, a lot of times people have the misconception that we are just the paper pushers, right? Yeah. And that's not the case. And they always think that we are very administrative, right? Mm-hmm. We, in the beginning, maybe that is what it was. But I would say fast forward, into your late 80s, early 90s, it really started to make a shift. And so we are far more than just your hiring, firing, putting your party planner hat together. In fact, I know for me personally, I'm not planning your parties. Don't come over here with that. That is your team. If you want to plan a party, by all means, I'm all for employee engagement. So it's so exciting to hear that. But one of the concerns that I heard, it's something in my ear just peaked, it popped up and was like, what? That there was a hostile work environment and you didn't know who to go to. Mm-hmm. That's a concern. So my question to you is, did you not know that you could go to HR? Did no one present that as an option for you in the situation that you experienced?
Yeah. So when I was in that workplace, it was never really presented to me who I should go to if I had issues. We were a unionized organization. So the first thought was, well, should I take this to the union? But it never occurred to me to really go through HR. And my family, I grew up with a single mother and my maternal grandparents. And so my maternal grandparents were very well versed in the organization's happenings. And so they were the ones that were like, well, what about human resources? Where are they in this equation? So it was actually my family that was the one that really helped me see, oh, there's another person here. Like I should be engaging with them. And so that, unfortunately, that human resources wasn't a visible entity within that workplace.
That's awesome that your family was well versed and understood and knew who to go to, but definitely concerning from an HR professional's perspective that HR was not visible. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm not the party planner, but I know I really try whenever I have new hires that come in. Well, right now everything is virtual, but I make it my business to have 15 minutes. I send them an invite and say, hey, I just want you to know I'm Camille. I'm the HR site leader. Do you have any questions? And we just have a little conversation. I learn about what they do. I tell them what I do. That introduction is so important so that they know. So I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I'm happy that it did, because now we have someone that gets it. And
Mhm.
so when you say that, and I know SNHU, they do have an amazing master's program.
Yeah.
When you say that HR is strategic, but they also work with people, expound on that for me.
Yeah, so I think unfortunately, like you said, the history of human resources has always been that kind of administrative, secretarial, transactional, operational sort of facet of the organization. It was never really seen as a business leader. It was always just, that function over there that nobody really talks around or talks about. And when I think of the ways in which HR operates, it is innately strategic. So sometimes people are like, well, why do we shouldn't put a label of strategic onto human resources because it already is. But it doesn't always show up that way. And so, when I think of a strategic human resource business partner or business leader, it's about really understanding the organizational goals, the business objectives. What are we adding to those? What's the value that we're bringing? And that means not only looking at things through a human resource lens, but from a business lens. What do these different departments need in order to be the best that they can? And how can we provide them value to achieve those goals to help the business reach its, whether it's revenue, productivity, whatever its objectives are. And so it's about the different mindset in HR. It's about more than just pushing the papers through, pushing the people through, signing documents, event planning. That's hilarious because I agree. I did not go into this field to plan birthday parties. Like I'm happy to support, but that's not what I want to do. But yeah, that's really what it's about. It's about human resources being a department that is seen as strategic as marketing. We have our users. We have our users that we have to understand what is important to them. How do they operate? Why do they operate that way? And how is that helping the business? And so that's what I think of when I think of strategic human resources.
I love it. I simply love it because you are just singing to my heart. There is um, David Seiler. He actually has study guides and he trains people on how to pass their certification. And he would love to hear what you have to say, because those are the things that he preaches. How
Mhm.
it's so important that we remain strategic. We are a business in ourselves, and the
Mhm.
company is our customer, right? And so we have to make sure that no, we're not just the police, but we have to understand their business and
Mhm.
then remind them that the MVPs, the most valuable players, and the commodity is the people. And what are we doing with the people? Are we making sure that we succession plan?
Mhm.
Are we providing them with the additional training that they need so that they are successful? Henceforth, the company is more successful. So it's so awesome to hear, someone understand that it is so much more than just paper pushing and, and helping people get time off. We are
Yes.
past that. So now that you're in the field and you're working in the field, and so how long have you been in the field? How long have you been working in this crazy, crazy business?
Officially about almost 2 months. Yeah, since January. And it's been a really, really interesting journey getting to this point.
Awesome, awesome. So what does your day look like? Like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah,
And
so Assemble HR Consulting is basically in startup mode. It's a very small team, but we provide coaching, advising for leadership culture, change, conflict, and so it's heavily focused on learning and development, but also coaching and advising. So for me as the coordinator, I get to have my hands in a lot of different buckets, which I love because it's all about learning the business. And I think that this has been a really great opportunity for me because it's helped me realize and reinforce that idea that as a human resources professional, I don't have to be siloed into just human resources, but I have to understand why we're doing certain things in the business. So my day can look like really understanding marketing, even with social media, like how does that help propel the company forward? It can look like, doing surveys for feedback from our clients. It can look like just regular coordination like scheduling and emailing, or it can look like setting up decks for learning and development. So I feel like gaining all of these different skills that have been really helpful to open up my eyes to the fact that HR doesn't have to just be, pushing papers through, signing things, all that other stuff. It's really helped me to embrace the business itself.
I love it, because now with you working for a startup, you're able to have your hands in everything. And so
Mhm.
you're just not, you don't have that one mind like, okay, well, I only do payroll. Okay,
Yeah.
I only do ER. Okay, I only do this. But instead, you're able to do various different things. And the body of knowledge, it's $5 now. And it can go from payroll to employee relations to, being an HR business partner, because that's really what it's all about. Like, in one way or another, we are all pretty much HR business partners, and our business is the organization. We
Mhm.
partner with our business leaders to lead the organization where they need to go and make sure that, of course, we keep everyone compliant. So now that you're in it and you see the madness that happens, right? Are you loving it more? Is your experience like an amazing one?
Yeah, I'm really thankful for the opportunity and the experience, and it's helped open my eyes to the fact that there's a realm of possibility out there that is more than what we learn at school, and it's really throwing me into a business to how to learn it from the inside out. So
I love that. So tell me a little bit about Clubhouse. You have been moderating some awesome rooms, let me tell you. And one of the things I think in one of the rooms, it had a lot to do with like diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the rooms that you moderated. And that's kind of how we connected in that room. So tell me a little bit about what it's been like for you moderating in Clubhouse, because that's like the new wave, I'm telling you.
it's been different. When I first got onto Clubhouse, I thought, what am I going to do on this? I have no clue. But I knew that it was an excellent opportunity to really connect with other people and to really start putting a voice literally to topics that needed to be talked about. Because on LinkedIn, you can make posts, you can do LinkedIn lives and things like that. But this is in real time. There's no perfecting it, there's no editing. It's just how it is. And so, I talked with my really good friend, Tiffany Castano. We met over LinkedIn actually last year, and we decided to hold this room of Let's Talk HR, where we wanted to put out topics that matter and that often don't get talked about. So, the room that you were in was about where's the DEI in HR? Because when we think about it, statistically and with data, at least, we haven't had this study done in a while, but it really needs to be done, is HR is 88% white women. And
Yes, it
so
is.
when we talk about the fact that HR is championing diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that's great. But how can we say that when our own ranks don't even reflect who we're serving? So that was the goal of that discussion, is to really start talking about this in the discipline, because we still have a long way to go. And I wanted to moderate a room that allowed people to come and listen and learn, but also be challenged in a way that allowed them to stretch and grow and not be afraid to talk about these things. Because I think that's what's been kind of happening is HR is like, yeah, we support DEI, but we're not doing that internal reflection to say, oh, but wait, we have a problem inside this discipline.
Right, right. And I think that's one of the things that when I did, because I had a chance to come on stage and talk a little bit, that was one of the things that I mentioned, like, how can we say, oh, yes, yes, we're for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we haven't even cleaned up our own house.
Mhm.
There's definitely a problem within. And just for it to be 2000, what is it, 2021, I
Mhm.
started in the field in 2001, August of 2001, August 27th, 2001 is when I started in
Wow.
HR. And so it is now March of 2021, and 88% of our field is comprised of Caucasian women
Mhm.
in leadership positions
Yep.
as well. So my question is 20 years, and there's probably more than, it's probably like 90 something, but 88%, that is, that's mind boggling. And so what I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed this too, but even in places like Clubhouse and LinkedIn, they even have something called Black LinkedIn.
Mhm.
I was like, what is that? Like, what am I? As an Afro Latina woman, I'm like, I bounce on both sides. I'm like,
Mhm.
hey, I'm down with everybody, right? But I didn't know. And I was like, what does that mean? And then all of a sudden I seen all of these beautiful women of color, and not just Black women. I saw Black, Hispanic, African-American, Black, Hispanic, Middle Eastern, South Asian, like all of these different women of color having their own consulting organization. So a part of me started wondering, is that why it's 88%? Because the women of color weren't getting opportunities within organizations. So they decided to go on their own and branch out and start their own consulting. Because I don't know if you've noticed it, but there are a lot of women of color that own their own consulting firms. And that's good. But we could use them in these organizations for sure, right? And that kind of made me wonder, like, okay, is that where some of the concern is? Is it because we have not given them an opportunity, so they decided to go elsewhere? And so for us as HR professionals, I challenge us to make a change and to do better. But I'm really impressed with you. That's why I wanted to really connect with you and have you on my YT channel, because I was just like, I really want to connect with her, because you are so new to this field, yet you're coming in, you're just blazing, saying, hey, this is what I see. And you've been doing this officially for 2 months, but of course studying for a while now to get your master's. But that's just impressive. And so I would say, keep it up. Keep it up. Don't keep your foot on our neck. Do not let up. Do not let up, because I absolutely love it. So now that you're in the field, and your hands are all in it, what would you say? What is a goal of yours? What would you love to see happen in the space, in the world of HR? What would you like to see? If you could change one thing, what would you want to change?
I want to get rid of the phrase, well, this is how we've always done it. That's a phrase that kind of came from dispatching. When you're used to doing a process a certain way, that's how you do it. But what I learned in that job is that things are constantly evolving. You can't have a process for people. And whether it's dispatching or human resources, you have to be okay with that process evolving as people do. And what I've seen in HR is that sometimes there's this like deep dedication to a process, which is understandable. That's your baby. You've helped that grow, but as with a human baby, you have to let them grow, develop, evolve into adults fully functioning. And I think, I want HR to grow out of, well, that's the way we've always done it, because it really holds the discipline back. And it keeps us in these archaic and transactional operational modes that don't allow us to be the business leaders that we are.
I love that, because that's something that works my last nerve. I cannot stand when I hear that. It's like, okay, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, right?
Yep.
Expecting different results. And I think that's what happens in HR. And that is kind of why we've gotten that negative kind of backlash here recently, because we're continuing to do the same things, but the world no longer looks the same. I would definitely say the millennials and now the Zs are coming in and they're like, oh no, that doesn't work for us. And I would say kudos to the generation, to the Zs and the millennials, for doing things that Xers like me, we spoke out. No one really listened, so we just continued to just business as usual. But every now and then we would come back and say something. So I am so happy to see the new generation of HR professionals coming in, and they're kicking down doors and they're taking names. So, and I love that, because I think it's necessary for us to be successful. We really, really need that. Another thing I wanted to ask, how do you feel? I don't know. I read an article recently and a gentleman was talking about dismantling HR. He said that he felt that organizations no longer needed HR, that they could just outsource everything. And I thought to myself, has he lost his mind? But then I thought, why would he feel that HR needed to be dismantled? And so one of the questions I wanted to ask is, do you feel that HR needs to change the way that they're operating? Do you feel like we need to put the human back in HR? Is that where the issue is? What do you think our problem is? Why a lot of people and organizations are saying, let's just dismantle HR and we can outsource payroll and all of that?
Yeah, I think, I hear what he's saying, and people's lived experiences with HR are valid. I think sometimes when we tell people, well, it's not all HR practitioners, we're kind of putting a Band-Aid over the root of the issue, and we're not giving people's lived experiences the validation and honor that they deserve, because some people have experienced real trauma with HR. And we have to admit that, and so for this gentleman, I think that when we say we want to dismantle HR, we're not looking deeper into the root cause of the issue. HR is basically a cog on the wheel for an organization. And, if we were to dismantle HR, I don't believe that would solve the issues, because if we really break it down, it's this archetype of leadership that we have all grown up with, that that is causing this issue, that leadership is basically a white man. And we see that now in organizations where all of these CEOs, I think there's only 8% of CEOs are Black, and I think even less are, even maybe a little bit more, but I'm not sure, are Latinx.
Yes.
So we can't say that HR is totally to blame for things that are going on. I think, if we were to dismantle HR, you would still see the same patterns repeated in other departments, because at some point, all of this is ingrained in systems that were never created to uphold people, but specifically people of color. They were created to produce capital and produce money. And sometimes those systems do not put the human into the workplace. So, I really think that we have to start really working on dismantling the archetype of leadership and what it means to be a true leader. And before we start dismantling HR, and I think, as far as putting the human back into HR, I think we really have to put the human back into the entire organization, because at the end of the day, if one department's focusing on the human more than others, that's not going to solve the organization's problems. Each department has its own culture. And if that culture is not embracing the human, we can't expect the human to be put back into the workplace through one department. So, yeah, I think I hear people's frustrations with HR. I've definitely had my own before. And so I think they're valid. We're not perfect. And I would never tell somebody, well, that's not everybody's experience, so stop blaming HR. No, you have a right to feel how you do, because there has been trauma done by HR. Let's work on moving, together with that to make it a better place, because at the end of the day, it's an entire organization. It's not just the human resource department.
I love it. And that is so true, because we really need to change the way organizations view human resources, but we also have to start at the top, right? Mm-hmm. So when organizations are saying, well, we want to have DEI efforts and things like that, I always say, is the organization making your diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is it a priority, or is it the priority? Because then if it's the priority, you'll start to see a change, because then it will require that the buy-in is from the CEO, because that's what you really need. You need to get the CEO's buy-in. If you do not get the CEO's buy-in, it doesn't matter what you're saying. You might as well put that whole process to the side and spin wheels all day and just figure out something else to do, because that's what one of the issues is. I do think that organizations really need to it's hard to realize or admit when you're at fault, right? Because everyone wants to believe that they are doing what's right. And you're asking people to change the way of thinking that has been, their whole life experience. But I do like the fact that you say, when we are having those conversations with people and people say, well, HR did this. I know personally people have come to me and I always say, I'm sorry that happened to you. I would love to see, just like lawyers have the what do you call it? The board that makes sure if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they can take away their license. The same thing with a physician. There needs to be some organization that also holds us accountable. I have always felt that way, because we are too deeply embedded in an organization to be out here running wild and doing whatever we want and how we want. Because there's some people that they're in this for the power and not because they really want to help a business or help people, right? Because when I first started, that's what I liked people. I was like, I like people. I really enjoy working with them and helping them. And I soon learned that maybe I don't like people as much as I thought because so much stuff is happening. But then I realized, no, I really I do care about people, and I want to watch people grow in their careers and help them get to the next level. And I love to have my employer relation conversations with managers and leaders and help them to learn how to coach and give and deliver feedback to their employees.
Mhm.
That is such a fulfilling thing for me. But a lot of employee relations and HR professionals, that's not what they're in this for, and it is not. If anyone is in this field because they think it's glamorous, they're in the wrong business. This is not the glamorous role. We
Mhm.
either get the praise or it's all our fault. So, it's really no middle ground in our career at all.
Mhm.
So if you've known someone or someone came up to you and said, Angelica, what advice would you give me so that I could start my career in HR? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think my first piece of advice would be to really do the inner work. Why do you want to go into HR? You need to understand what your goals are and what your intention is, because if you don't know your intention, your actions will not speak and align with who you are. You have to understand why you want to go into this. And sometimes people say, well, oh, I just love people. And I think that's important, but it's not the entirety of human resources. And so sometimes when we go into these roles, even with dispatching, I had to realize my love of people and helping people, it did not reflect every single thing that I was doing in that job. Yes, I was able to help people, but there was also a system in place that I had to follow. And it's the same within human resources. We are not just there to, be the psychologist and other things. We are there to help the business, and we are there to be business leaders who specialize in helping people help the business. And so I would really just tell someone to do the internal work to understand why you want to go into this field, to make sure it aligns, because why waste your time on a discipline that's not going to align with you, and then a few years down the road you're going to be burnt out, or you're going to be like, why am I here, why am I doing this? So I would start there, and I would also start with really interviewing people, get to know people in this field in different forms of HR, whether it's recruiting, learning and development, talent acquisition, employee relations, to understand their day to day and if that really aligns with what you thought it would. Because, yeah, sometimes we can glamorize HR and think that we are just there on the couch talking to people about their days at work. And it's not always like that. And I've seen those posts about how like we're the unofficial like psychologist, unofficial lawyer, and while that's kind of funny, it is a responsibility that we have to take seriously, and you have to think about whether or not you're ready to adopt those unofficial titles and the unofficial titles that you haven't thought of yet and don't realize exist.
Exactly, because I actually have a t-shirt that has that, and I had a mug at one time, but it's the truth. You feel like an attorney. Sometimes you feel like a therapist, a mother, a daycare provider, but that's part of what we do. But it's also necessary that we educate people so that they can better help themselves, right? Because that's what, and it starts with the leaders. Our job is to really coach and work with those leaders so that they can get aligned, so that they're able to have those conversations with their employees, and they aren't always running to HR to save the day. Because at the end of the day, I always tell my managers, well, these are your employees.
Hmm.
So you need to have that conversation. And
Yeah.
a lot of times they're looking at me like, what? You want me to talk to them? I'm like, yeah, that's what we're paying you for.
Hmm.
But you really have to learn to be able to deliver that information in a way that is receptive and have those conversations with people. And I think I always let my leaders know I don't know everything, but
Yeah.
we're going to go through this together. And just having that open, honest conversation is so important in this field. And you've got to be honest with yourself when certain things are just not going your way. Maybe you need to walk away, because HR it can be a bit taxing from time to time. But
Hmm.
when I think back, I genuinely do love what I do. Even on long, crazy days, I enjoy what I do, because you never know what the next day is going to hold, because no day in HR is the same. And that
Hmm.
right there is just awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So finally, where can viewers connect with you online, Angelica?
Yeah, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's my first and last name, Angelica Patlan. Or on Clubhouse, it's the at Angelica Patlan. So I'm on Clubhouse and LinkedIn mostly. And then from Clubhouse, you'll see my Instagram, but I'm not really on that. So LinkedIn is probably the best.
You don't have time for Instagram because you're on Clubhouse. If you want to find her, LinkedIn and Clubhouse is the place to go for sure. Angelica, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out to speak with me. I enjoyed it.
Of course. Thank you. I did too.
You're so welcome. Have a great one.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.